Welcome to MACC Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm Celeste Davidson, the Development Director here at the MACC. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Puryear Farms in Gallatin. Puryear Farms, professionalism in landscape services for over 25 years.
Thank you, Celeste, and welcome everyone to MACC Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the MACC as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. Celeste, you are, in addition to being a development director, a remarkably creative person. People may not know this, but you are, in addition to being a arts administrator, you are also a caterer and a cook and a multi-talented person. Tell me what sort of creative things you've been doing this week.
Well, thank you, John. Yes, so I have been able to blend my job here at the MACC, surrounded by this beautiful exhibit of Salvador Dali, with my love of cooking. And so we've been creating a fantastic menu of tapas for our members only event. So it's been very fun and creative, and yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about tapas. What is that?
Tapas is, in Spain, traditionally, it's the way they eat. It's like small plates of many different items. I don't know if you know this, but I'm sure you do, John, but they tend to eat light, take a long siesta, go back to work for a while, and then they go out late for dinner and have drinks and tapas. So when I was in Spain, I got to experience this. It was amazing. And one of the dishes that stuck with me were bacon wrapped dates. So of course those are on the menu for this weekend. They've become one of my staples when I used to be in catering. And so we're going to make those for this weekend, along with some amazing manchego cheese and some jamon. And we're just really going to get into the spirit of Spanish cuisine, which Dali was Spanish, and he loved baguettes. He was obsessed with baguettes. So we'll have a lot of baguettes. So we're having so much fun in this creative environment here at the MACC, and with, I get to bring my talents in, and I just love it. So yeah, it's great, and it's fulfilling, and it'll be delicious.
Wow, that really whets my appetite. Appetite, the universal wolf, as Shakespeare would have said. And speaking of Shakespeare, we should go ahead and introduce this week's guest. Denice Hicks is the artistic director of Nashville Shakespeare Festival. Over the course of her long career, she has edited, directed, and performed in over 50 Shakespeare productions. She was also an original company member of Tennessee Repertory Theater, and she was among the founders of Dark Horse Theater and People's Branch Theater. Without question, her contribution to Nashville's theater community has been extraordinary. Indeed, the Nashville scene named her one of the city's 25 most influential citizens since 1989. Hicks will be stepping down from her role at Nashville Shakespeare Festival at the end of next month, September 30th, bringing a 30-plus year chapter of her career to a close. So we're thrilled that she's here with us today to talk about her time in Nashville, her future plans, and tell us a little bit about Nashville Shakespeare Festival's current production of As You Like It. Denice Hicks, welcome to MACC Talk.
Thanks so much, John.
You've been involved with Nashville Shakespeare Festival in one capacity or another since 1990. You've been the executive artistic director since 2005. Why are you stepping down now at the end of September?
The Shakespeare Festival is in a really good place right now, as far as we are definitely on the upswing, recovering after the pandemic, and Nashville has changed so much. So I've been in Nashville since 1980, when I moved here to work for Opryland in the Country Music USA show, and I just feel like the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, which is such a wonderful tradition for Nashville families that come every summer, and couples and single people and everybody, that it's a really great time for the Nashville Shakespeare Festival to change with the city. So having younger leadership take over with new visions and new ideas is really exciting to me. I love this company. I love the city. I love the community. And I feel like it's a great time for new energy to take over.
Okay. Well, just to be clear, you're stepping away from the administration, but you're going to continue your life in theater. Is that right?
Sure hope so. That's my plan. I hope to keep acting forever and directing, also teaching, leading workshops, consulting, doing, that freelance everything.
Okay. So staying busy. When did you first fall in love with Shakespeare?
I fell in love with Shakespeare when my high school English teacher, Mr. Polignon, stood up in front of the class and passionately recited two households, both alike in dignity, as we started reading Romeo and Juliet. And his passion for it really just translated into, I grew up in the country outside Philadelphia, like riding my pony. And he just had this passion for Shakespeare that transcended our, he never told us, oh, you country kids, this is beyond you or above you. And he really helped us love it and understand it and embrace it for the poetic enlightenment it is. Shakespeare he's an enlightened writer, and he did it in prose and poetry. So pretty amazing.
Well, I was wondering about that question. Leonard Bernstein once said that the genius of Beethoven was that he always knew which note must come next.
Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering, what was Shakespeare's genius? What do we get from Shakespeare that we don't get from any other creative personality?
I think Shakespeare has such a broad scope that I think we may get bits and pieces in other wonderful playwrights and screenwriters and poets. But Shakespeare's real genius, I think, at the real heart of his writings was that he could look into the heart of humanity and then reflect for us, as Hamlet says, hold the mirror up to our nature of our best and our worst. And that has remained relevant through the centuries and through cultures. Shakespeare's stories and plays are translated into other languages. They play in other cultures. They play at other times in other languages, because he's writing about who we are as humans and how we relate to each other and what happens when we fall in love and what happens when we get jealous and what happens when we are betrayed. So all of that really, to me, is the genius of it. It's far more than just poetry or just a play. It's really a reflection of humanity.
He was living in quite a revolutionary period in Europe, and I'm wondering, kind of a dangerous period in Europe, where ideas about religion and a person's place in society were changing quite radically. And I'm wondering if that might have fueled some of his thinking and his imagination.
Yeah, no doubt. He so craftily toes the line of playwrights at the time would get drawn and quartered if they said anything against the wrong people.
Or if you sang the wrong thing in church.
Oh, he was yeah. Or if you go to the wrong church.
Yeah.
And there are lots of stories about the Catholicism of his family that kept the family in danger for so long. But he was really crafty about not indicting any particular point of view. And yet he was also, controversial. And, I think of Coriolanus, which is a less produced play because it's really hard to do, but we did it in 2008, the last time our country was very, very much divided and in danger of falling apart because of politics. And Shakespeare in that play, he indicts the people for for having a mob mentality and following whatever next hottest thing is. And so I love that play in that year because it really didn't say, liberals are bad and conservatives are good or vice versa. He said, people, think for yourselves. And so I know that was relevant in Shakespeare's time, and it sure carries through and truly today.
Wow. And not too long before then, that would be a very dangerous idea, wouldn't it? In the age where, the Catholic Church pretty much expected to tell you what you were supposed to think.
Yeah. Well, he was under the Protestant queen, and
he was.
beheaded her sister for being Catholic, and that's And in so many ways, like, we don't have those kinds of blatant assassinations nowadays, but we do definitely have character assassinations, and one wrong statement it used to be able to just take you down. Now, I feel like there's a whole lot of partisanship that's happening, that things that we used to say, oh, well, that's the end of their career. It isn't anymore.
So that's the beginning of a new career as a talk radio personality.
Yeah, and there they go, and now they're off.
But the huge thing that was in Shakespeare's day, it wasn't too old when he was active, was the printing press.
Right.
Which was really, when you think about it, I mean, that's like, I guess we're in that kind of a period right now, where we have this whole digital revolution, and everybody has instantaneous abilities to convey the craziest ideas.
Anybody and everybody.
And of course, in his day, that was the new thing. Yeah. And people were now suddenly reading the Bible for themselves and making their own minds up.
Ooh,
as opposed to the local priest or monk or somebody.
Yeah. Well, Shakespeare's his audience members, some of them would stand because they couldn't afford a seat, and some would sit, and then the really nice seats were saved for the very upper classes. But I think that having people stand while watching a play gives them that opportunity to really think for themselves, and therefore they were very vocal, and they would, shout out, they'd throw things at the actors. I mean, I just think throughout humanity, it's always been a kind of dangerous time for everybody. We all have to tread carefully and choose our words with mindfulness.
We're speaking with Denice Hicks, Artistic Director of Nashville Shakespeare Festival. We'll be right back after this important message.
Creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. The staff at Purrier Farms, local professionals in landscape and design, share this outlook with the staff at Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Creativity consists of rearranging what we know in order to find out what we do not know. To think creatively, we must be able to look freshly at what we normally take for granted. Purrier Farms, professionalism in landscape service and design, serving Gallatin and Sumner County for over 25 years. For information, visit them at purrierfarms.com.
We're back with Nashville Shakespeare Festival Artistic Director Denice Hicks. Let me ask you, speaking of politics and other things, what is your favorite Shakespeare play? Do you have one? I have one. I'll admit it.
Yeah?
It's Henry V.
Oh, yeah.
The St. Crispin's Day speech, to me, is just the most inspiring thing I think I've ever heard.
It really is.
And even Winston Churchill was so inspired that he convinced Laurence Olivier in the early 40s, do a movie on that. We need that now.
Yeah, we do. And I know I have a little military issue copy of that play that they handed out to World War II soldiers to carry in their pockets, and they would read it, in their downtimes. And I know during the Civil War, they would act out, like in camp time when they had their downtime and everything. The soldiers would learn parts and perform Shakespeare's plays for each other.
Abraham Lincoln loved Shakespeare, and he would sometimes make his pronouncements about the favorite version that he saw, and he would be critiqued for that. They say, isn't he wasting his time watching Shakespeare?
Yeah.
And which he would feel just, like, go mind your own business.
Right. It really, I think when you take the time to sit down and read the plays, I do that with other people, because I think reading alone a theatrical piece like that is really challenging. So we started, in 2008, I started a program with the libraries where we read, it's called Shakespeare Aloud, and we read one play out loud a month, and it's really helpful to just hear the language, but it's beneficial and it's enriching, because if you take the time, even if you're learning the English language. Like, we do have some English language learners that come to these readings. They take the time to really say, well, what is he saying here? And what does this word mean? And why does he juxtapose these two thoughts in this antithetical phrase? It helps. It makes you a better thinker and, well, sometimes speaker.
Yeah.
I find myself stammering and stuttering a lot, but I still so appreciate the vocabulary that Shakespeare has offered me, and just the way of thinking all the way around ideas. My favorite play is always the one I'm working on, which is currently As You Like It. I love this play, and I love the productions we have done. This is our 4th production that the Shakespeare Festival has presented of it. But I have perennial favorites like The Tempest, which I really, really love because of the message that the rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. I just like that play builds toward that moment, and I think it's just a really beautiful emotional catharsis for Prospero and for the audience, hopefully. And, it's got music, and it's got magic, and it's got, Ariel, the ethereal power, and Caliban, the earthly being. And I really love that one.
Yeah. The amazing thing about Shakespeare, when you think about over the centuries, is just how much other art he has inspired. My background was as a classical pianist, so my introduction to The Tempest was Beethoven's Piano Sonata in D minor. Opus 31 number 2, which is The Tempest.
Yeah.
Which captures,
yes,
Prospero and all the emotions in that play, translates that into sound. But of course, once I heard that sonata, I had to go read the play.
Right.
And then watch it.
So,
there's so much of art, from paintings to other literature. Just a line or a phrase from a Shakespeare play, Infinite Jest, can inspire a whole modern novel.
Yeah, Sweet Thunder, is that, I think one of the Marcelluses has a whole tour that they do called Sweet Thunder. It's a Hippolyta line from Midsummer Night's Dream. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is, and that's back to that. The core of him is he shows us our humanity, and then that certainly echoes out in all forms of art.
Right. He could. He was a great associative thinker and thought in metaphor. He could just associate one thing with another and find a universal message to come out of that. Yeah. But he also was a linear thinker. He could get from, scene 1 to scene 2 perfectly and directly. So that, I think, is the genius, and that's so rare. It's your Einstein who can envision in his mind a flexible universe, but then he can put the math to make it work.
Right.
That's your genius,
It is.
The Beethoven who can hear all those notes in his head. He's deaf. He can hear all those notes, but he can write them down.
Yeah.
That's your genius. That's what's rare.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people are one or the other.
Right. There was, Shakespeare was cranking out those plays. He wrote so many.
He was on fire.
He really was. And yet, through the Shakespeare Loud program that we've done at the library, we've read all of his plays 5 times. So we're in the 5th reading of the canon. It takes 3 years to read, if you only read one a month. It takes 3 years to get through them, and we started this in 2008. But you start to see there is a formula there. There is, right around Act 3, Scene 1 or 2 will be a turning point, and it's usually a great place to put an intermission. And then you can do Acts 4 and 5, and they play on out. But I am always amazed at the structural genius that he had of introducing. He also has this odd thing that we don't do very much anymore, which is introduce some key characters in the second half of the whole play. Like starting in Act 3 or Act 4, you'll meet some new folks. You go, wait, who are they? And I think it was really just a way to continually challenge his audiences to keep their attention and see who's coming out. They would know we haven't met everybody yet, and they'd stick with it instead of going out to see the bear fighting the dog or whatever distractions they had at the time.
What was your first role or big role in a Shakespeare play? I have to ask you.
It was Juliet.
You were
actually.
Juliet.
So I started
you
as
had a lead
Juliet.
role.
I did in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh Playhouse, which is a big, beautiful old theater that got torn down a couple of years ago. But it was, again, back to, I was in college at the time and didn't know, I was a sophomore. I think I wasn't supposed to audition for the play, but I didn't know that, and I did. And then I got cast, and I didn't know as much about Shakespeare as I do, like just how to approach the text and how to there are the really great keys and tools that you can use to really unlock the text. I didn't know them then, but I understood that character really well, and I just played it. I got to play Juliet again for here in Nashville, or down south in Nashville. We're in Hendersonville now.
Right.
But over in Nashville, for Nashville Repertory Theater, I got to play Juliet again 10 years after I played it when I was 19 and again when I was 29. And I learned a lot, but it's always really fun when you can revisit
Do you do
a
it
play.
differently each time?
Yeah, you have to, because it's a whole new, you got a different family, you have a different set, you have a different director. So that's what his plays are so mutable. Is that the word?
I guess so. It sounds good to me.
That different directors and different music really will put a different spin on it, different costumes.
Yeah, Itzhak Perlman, the violinist, once told me that, when he introduces his students to the Beethoven Violin Concerto, that he says, "Welcome to the Beethoven Violin Concerto journey."
Oh, nice.
Because, it's always, you're going to see it differently as you mature, as your experiences change. It's not going to be the same piece that you played when you were 15 as when you're 15.
Definitely not. It's like when you pick up a book after, 10 or 20 or 30 years and reread Ayn Rand or somebody that rang in one way when you were 25 and completely differently when you're 50.
Yeah. What have been your favorite you've played Juliet? What have been your other favorite Shakespeare roles?
I love to play the non-humans, so I have played Puck and Ariel, and I really love those. And Titania, the Queen of the Fairies. It's really fun to not be held to the confines of your human body. So when I was Ariel, I got to fly. Then we brought a flying company in, and they rigged me so I could zoom into the air 20 feet, and it was just so much fun to be able to do that. And so those are fun. I love the role I'm playing now, which is Duke Sr. in As You Like It, who's just a wise, wonderful leader who's making the best use of adversity as she has been exiled to the Forest of Arden by her evil, usurping brother. But it's a tiny role. I come out and I say a really great speech, and then I go off and come back at the very end.
We're speaking with Denice Hicks, Artistic Director of Nashville Shakespeare Festival. We'll be right back after this important message.
Creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. The staff at Pereire Farms, local professionals in landscape and design, share this outlook with the staff at Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Creativity consists of rearranging what we know in order to find out what we do not know. To think creatively, we must be able to look freshly at what we normally take for granted. Pereire Farms, professionalism in landscape service and design, serving Gallatin and Sumner County for over 25 years. For information, visit them at PereireFarms.com.
We're back with Nashville Shakespeare Festival Artistic Director Denice Hicks. The Shakespeare Festival does famously performances in the park in the summer, but there are also winter performances. Is there a formula that you guys have for picking ones for the outdoors, for the family fun, versus what you might see indoors in the wintertime?
Right. And we have done tragedies in the summer. We have. But, it's really... we did a production of Macbeth, for instance, in the park in 2016, and it was really gory. It's like super bloody with
as it
literal
should be.
buckets of blood dumped on Banquo's head, and like, oh, just so much. And I had put an age advisory on it, and I said, this is probably for 12 years and up. There were 7-year-olds just hoping to get splashed with blood every night. So there, it's, again, times are changing. I wouldn't, my son was probably 13 before he saw any violence on film or on stage. But I think that the formula for choosing our shows comes from the people. A lot of times I walk through the audience and say, what do you like to see? And we offer lots of surveys. So just knowing where people's heads and hearts are is really helpful. We chose a comedy for this summer, a musical comedy at that, because we knew in an election year, people are going to be tense. They're going to be anxious. They're going to be, worried about the future. And so we just chose a really sweet, comforting comedy. Mm-hmm. So, but it's hard. It's hard to predict the future. Theater people live in the moment. We live right now. But as the artistic director or anyone who runs an arts organization, you have to be grant writing, a year to 18 months in advance. So you have to use your imagination and imagine what's going to be appropriate for in the winter, and for our fall tours and our spring shows. A lot of times we will align with curriculum and make it easier for the teachers. If a teacher has to teach Hamlet, it's way better for their students to see a production of it, and then they understand, oh, that's why we're reading this really difficult piece of literature. They can see it played, and they can see, oh, these are real people. Hamlet's a guy who's, crushed by the death of his father and mystified by the sudden remarriage of his mother to his uncle that he doesn't like. And it's very, very different than if it's just, to be or not to be. That is the question. They wonder.
Well, tell me a little bit more about As You Like It, because this is, it has, I think, if I remember my plays right, they get jumbled up sometimes in my head, but I think it has some of Shakespeare's best known lines. I mean, is it All the World's a Stage?
Yeah,
right?
that's in it. Yeah,
so,
and
that's in the top 5.
It is. It is.
Tell me a little bit about your approach to this production, your thinking about it, what was your setting, your director. Now, your music, as I understand, is original, isn't it? It's not just incidental music.
Right. There is some original incidental music, and Shakespeare wrote a couple of songs for this play that arguably we don't have the sheet music for it. Some people claim, no, this is the melody that he used, but we don't really know that for sure. Maybe. Well, discoveries are being made every day. So maybe somebody has finally proved this is. But usually when we do a Shakespeare play that has one of Shakespeare's songs in it, we get a composer to arrange it and write the melody. So for this, I've hired a really wonderful young director named Cammie Harris. And she saw the transition from the court to the Forest of Arden as the time when the conservatism of the 50s kind of gave way to the more revolutionary times of the 1960s. So the music translates somewhat. We start with Frank Sinatra style "That's Life" in the court, and then it rocks out when we go to the Forest of Arden. So that's been a lot of fun. And to hear, there's some famous tunes that so many composers have written to. Under the Greenwood Tree is one of the songs from this show, but this one sounds a whole lot like Blue Suede Shoes.
Okay.
And we just have fun with it, which is what we just need to do in the summertime, is have as much fun for the audience as we possibly can.
So I guess part of the theme here, you're going from this autocratic court into the forest. It's people sort of get to start thinking maybe a little bit more for themselves, a little bit more freely, and deciding
that's what
who they want to be, right?
Right. So my character, the Duke, says, he's very egalitarian. My very first line is, "Now my brothers and co-mates in exile." So immediately I say, I'm not the boss of you. We are all here together in exile, and we have to make the best of this situation. So that's as contrasted. In the beginning, we see my evil brother, who's just threatening violence everywhere he goes and exiling people and stealing their properties. And so it's a really fun difference that you see in these two. And then at the end, he has a religious conversion. There's a spoiler alert. He has a religious conversion and comes back like handing out flowers, like, peace and love and all of that. But it is that transition works really well for this show, to do it with music.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. I know that I believe I've seen somewhere that you have a real fascination as well with Emily Dickinson. Is that correct?
I do.
One of my all-time favorite poets. Tell me a little bit about your interest in her and her work.
Well, that started, actually, I was reading Emily Dickinson and Edgar Allan Poe as a child. So that was before my Shakespeare love. I really, my mother shared her love of poetry with me. So I was reading Emily Dickinson, who I just really related to, because again, I grew up in the country and spent, as the youngest by far of my siblings, I spent a lot of time with my dog and pony, and we hung out in the woods and just appreciated Emily's eschewing of the public life. And I related to that. So I had the opportunity in the mid-90s to do a statewide tour for Humanities Outreach of Tennessee of a one-woman show about Emily Dickinson called The Belle of Amherst. So thanks to Nancy Shumate, who was directing Humanities of Outreach of Tennessee at that time, I got to do that. And then these many years later, Tennessee Shakespeare Company asked me about doing a salon on Emily Dickinson. Mm-hmm. And that turned into a 75-minute one-woman show where we just rethought the whole, how would Emily present? And we had a wonderful time doing it. We're about to revise it for another production. And it just has to do with that. She was a free thinker, and she didn't like labels, and she wanted to write the way she wanted to write. She wanted to capitalize what she thought was important. She did not, posthumously, they corrected her poems. And it wasn't until much, much later that some editors came along and said, let's look at the originals and see what she had.
Well, she had all those amazing M dashes in her poems, and they're really, to me, I mean, I'm not an actor, but to me they sort of give clues as to how you would read them. I think that's what she was doing, and they didn't get that at the time. I mean, it's Victorian times, right? Yeah. She also didn't give titles. She had, so it's like, what's your favorite Emily Dickinson poem? I like number 340.
Yeah.
Well, actually, which I do. I actually printed it out. It's I've always been fixated on this one. I mean, she wrote like 1,800 poems, but it's talking about somebody who's prolific.
Yeah.
But I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. I mean, Tom Waits could have written that as a song.
Right.
It's so fascinating.
And when they all were seated, right? And when they all were seated, I know that one. I know that because it's toward the end of our one-woman show, but it's been 2 years since I've done it. What's that next line? And when they all were seated.
Oh yeah. And when they all were seated, a service like a drum
kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb.
And then at the very end, and then a plank in reason broke,
and I fell
dropped down and hit a world at every plunge and finished knowing
then.
And dash.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And I puzzled about that last line. Did I finish all knowing, or did I just finish thinking I knew? I don't know.
Well, that's the beauty there. But she tackled some very tough subjects for a person in her time and place. And wow.
Yeah.
So, which is why
we
we read her today. We're speaking with Denice Hicks, Artistic Director of Nashville Shakespeare Festival. We'll be right back after this important message.
Creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. The staff at Pereire Farms, local professionals in landscape and design, share this outlook with the staff at Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Creativity consists of rearranging what we know in order to find out what we do not know. To think creatively, we must be able to look freshly at what we normally take for granted. Pereire Farms, professionalism in landscape service and design, serving Gallatin and Sumner County for over 25 years. For information, visit them at PereireFarms.com.
We're back with Nashville Shakespeare Festival Artistic Director Denice Hicks. Well, let me ask you one final question. After all these years here in Nashville with this company, and you have been with other companies as well, what do you think your biggest accomplishment has been? What are you most proud of?
Well, we have grown the festival quite a bit, and I'd like to think I helped contribute to just growing the professional theater community here, because I was involved with the rep for many, many years, and also worked for children's theater as an actor and helped encourage Scott Copeland at the time to start using equity contracts and just establishing a more professional community. So I feel like we are thriving now. There are a lot of fantastic world-class actors that live here, that have chosen to live in Nashville and raise their families here, and they have, they are our community, but also the community theaters that are really thriving in all of the suburbs and even in the inner city. So I feel like I have contributed to a really exciting theater community. And so there's no one accomplishment to that, because it's just lots of, maybe some apprentices that came through our apprentice company training program went out and started a whole new Shakespeare Festival, and like they're out there doing their thing, and some are up in New York acting. And so just having a community of theater people that love and support each other is really important to me.
Well, this is maybe a little different, but I guess you've created a theater community where there are jobs for people to actually, get paid for doing what they love.
I had to make my living.
Yeah, Ann Patchett, the novelist, I mean, I think if you ask her what she's most proud of, it's getting jobs for people through her Parnassus books. That you get a certain satisfaction from that.
You do. You really, yeah.
As opposed to just writing a novel, which would, for most of us, that would be, wow, that'd be great. Like one chapter of an Ann Patchett novel. But in any case,
it's true.
It's true.
And yet, I have to just say, because it's also the painful part is we only have so many jobs, and we have more people, more talented, really capable, qualified people than we have jobs. So I really hope the community can continue to grow and support more people, because when you have, 350 people audition for 10 roles, that is 10 yeses and 340 no's that you've got to disappoint 340 people, and you're only pleasing 10,
right?
Who will then go on and please thousands. But it's very, it's been hard on my heart through the years to have really awesome people that I wasn't able to give a job to.
But hopefully the 340 no's will learn from their experience, and eventually there'll be a yes.
Yeah, that's what I tell them.
Because that's how you do it, right?
That's
have
no
how
idea.
You have to learn how to do that. That's part of the art is learning how to do an audition.
Yeah, they have no idea how close they get, or how just because whatever, there was some quality that this person had that went better with the other person than you. Or I actually one time had to tell a young lady that she was too exquisite. Like I would have put her in the ensemble, but she's a superstar. And I'm like, you're not right for these 2 roles, and therefore I can't put you in a smaller role. I just can't cast you at all because, when your superstar role comes up, we'll put you in then.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't think I've ever been rejected for being too good at it.
I know. Well, she did not understand, and I explained it to her mom, and I'm like, you got to back me up on this.
Right. Well, Denice Hicks, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and best of luck moving forward.
Thank you. We all need a lot of luck and a lot of love. Thanks, John.
You've been listening to MACC Talk from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you're interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Denice Hicks, Artistic Director of Nashville Shakespeare Festival. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinay. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.